Good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here, whether you're in person or on Zoom. I appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. My name is Kara Buckmaster. I am the Acting Division Chief of Emergency Management for Calvert County Government, and I work in the Department of Public Safety. Stacy?
I am Stacy O'Donnell, the Mitigation Specialist for Emergency Management.
I am Amalia Pleektam, Environmental Planner for Department of Planning and Zoning.
All right, we appreciate you guys all joining us tonight. On Zoom, we also have Adam Leister from MCM. Adam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kara, and good evening to everyone there in person. I apologize for not being able to be with you in person this evening, but circumstances kept me away. So I am doing this presentation remotely. So I hope that you can all hear me very well and see the screen. My name is Adam Leister. I am the primary consultant working on the Calvert County Hazard Mitigation Plan update for 2023. So I have been down there previously. I've been through all of the prior meetings with the local planning team, and we're going to have a brief meeting this evening. I know we have the room till a few minutes before 6:45, so we'll make sure that we meet that time frame as well so we can get the next meeting here without a hitch. So Kara, I'll turn it back over to you for any closing comments before we get started with the actual presentation. Thank you.
All right. So tonight we're going to go over the draft hazard mitigation plan for 2023. It's a 5-year process, and we are nearing the end of this process before the plan goes out for public comment. I don't want to take up too much time, so Adam, I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you, Kara. We will get started with the first slide here. Is just the title slide, Calvert County Hazard Mitigation Plan Update for the draft hazard mitigation plan. This is the public meeting for today, July 19th, 2023. And we will advance the slide here to the agenda for tonight's meeting. The first item on tonight's meeting agenda is going to be a brief overview of what is hazard mitigation planning. And we are going to review the update process and take a look at the risk assessment section, the capability assessment section, the mitigation strategy section, some of the next steps that we're going to be looking at as we move forward from this point forward as we're nearing the end of the project. And we'll do a brief conclusion, and we'll be able to answer some questions depending on the amount of time that's left over. So the first item that we'd like to cover during these presentations is, why is a hazard mitigation plan necessary? And for those of you who have watched the previous public meeting, this slide might look familiar, but what this slide shows is that the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, or the DMA 2000, which amended the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, or the Stafford Act, requires that all local jurisdictions have a hazard mitigation plan in place in order to receive certain types of disaster assistance and hazard mitigation funding. So what this means is that every incorporated municipality and every local jurisdiction must have a hazard mitigation plan in place for them to be eligible for pre- and post-disaster funds. If a plan is not in place, if something were to happen in a local jurisdiction, pre- and post-disaster funding might not be released. It wouldn't be available for those local jurisdictions to make use of if they don't have a plan in place. So the current hazard mitigation plan was adopted and promulgated by the Calvert County Commissioners, and the municipalities that are in Calvert County also adopted that plan, and it's used as support for that pre- and post-disaster funding since its promulgation. This is an update to that hazard mitigation plan, so this is taking your previous plan, updating each one of the sections, adding in more relevant information since the time frame of the previous plan, and making sure that everything is updated for 2023 and is ready to go. So the 2023 Hazard Mitigation Plan update, like we mentioned at the top of the meeting, it's required to be updated every 5 years, and that update process is continuous, though it is not a plan that is ideal to be put on a shelf and let collect dust for 5 years. We want actionable products and plans. So the hazard mitigation plan is going to be a continuously updated and actionable document. And our goal is to increase the actions and the amount of programs that can come out of the plan from the previous plan. So all plans can be and sometimes are reviewed annually, and this includes county reviews of all mitigation actions, and we'll talk about mitigation strategy a little later on in the meeting. And municipalities are able to provide progress reports on their project opportunities, and it captures any major emergency or disaster information that might have occurred since your previous plan was in place. These annual progress reports, if they're completed, are required to be submitted through the state and them. So any action items or review or updates to plans go straight through the state and then eventually end up in FEMA's hands. The Calvert County Hazard Mitigation Plan for 2023 is able to be completed with our assistance through a Calvert County Hazard Mitigation Grant. So the county then hired MCM Consulting Group Incorporated, which is the company that I work for. And the kickoff meeting for the steering committee, which is a small group of people at the county level who oversee the beginning of the process, was held on February 16th, 2023. And the local planning team was developed and is a comprehensive team of people both at the county and outside the county government that comprise the planning team for the hazard mitigation plan update. And that kickoff meeting was held on March 16th, so 1 month after the steering committee update. And the update process really begins as soon as those kickoff meetings occur. And those update processes start with capability assessments, risk assessments, mitigation strategy development, and then a draft plan, which is the status that we're currently at. And municipality involvement is of the paramount importance when we're looking at hazard mitigation plan updates. A hazard mitigation plan like the one that is being developed for Calvert County is a multi-jurisdictional plan. So not only is the plan the county's plan, the plan is also the municipalities that participate and attend meeting during the planning process. So they complete surveys and assessments, including capability assessments, which determines what type of capability each local jurisdiction has. They look at hazard identification worksheets, which we ask them to take a look at all the hazards that were in the previous plan and tell us what might have increased or decreased since the previous plan was put into place. And we also like to offer them mitigation opportunity form development, which allows them to place forms into the hazard mitigation plan for projects or items that they're looking at for potential funding if funds are released either pre or post disaster based on the hazard mitigation plan. One of the important things to note is that for a municipality to adopt the plan, they need to participate in the meetings and they need to submit worksheets. Those are the two items that FEMA requires to be considered a participating municipality. And once that's complete, local jurisdictions and incorporated municipalities are capable of adopting the county plan as their municipal plan, which is a great benefit. That means they don't need to go out and do their own plan as well. Public involvement is also one of the most important things to consider. So as the public, we ask that you identify any hazards in your area or your municipality. We have surveys and assessments that we've sent out previously, and we'll be sending out another one at the end of the meeting today for when the plan goes live for your review. We also ask that you provide input in the draft plan when it's ready. So when the plan goes up, we ask all the public who has a vested interest to take a look at the plan and provide us with public comments. We also ask public to participate in meetings, so all of you who are in the room there in Calvert County in person or online are doing that, and we appreciate your involvement in the meetings. And the plan and all the information for public meetings and things like that has really been handled through the Calvert County website or the Calvert County social medias for each of the offices that's been involved, and we appreciate all the public involvement we've had so far. So the next item on the list is a risk assessment review. This might be review for some of you who have watched the previous meeting. We'll be covering risk assessment, mitigation strategy, and capability assessments during this presentation. And if we start with risk assessment, the first item that is paramount to risk assessment is identifying hazards. And this element comes directly from FEMA. It says, does the plan include a description of the type, location, extent of all natural hazards that can affect the jurisdiction? And does the plan also include information on previous occurrences of the hazard events and the future probability of those events? And that comes right from FEMA's CFR guidance, and that's right from the new guidance that was put into place this year. So when we look at identifying hazards, we note any past presidential, gubernatorial, county, and municipal disaster declarations, and this information was in one of our previous presentations for Calvert County, but that includes tropical storms like Isaias, COVID-19, a lot of the things that have occurred since your previous plan was put into place. And we also develop a list of natural and human-caused hazards. FEMA requires natural hazards, but in order for it to be the most comprehensive hazard mitigation plan possible, we also look at human-caused hazards. So we review previous hazards that are in your current plan, like the list that you see there, coastal erosion, drought, earthquake, extreme temperature, etc., all the way through winter storms. And we identify new hazards that you might not have had, but we as a consultant have seen other local jurisdictions putting into their hazard mitigation plan. That might give you more actionable items at the end of the planning process, like emergency services shortages, opioid epidemic, utility interruptions. For Calvert County, a lot of the new hazards were actually human-caused hazards. The natural hazards were quite robust for this planning period for the previous plan, so we're just updating all of those, and a lot of the new hazards we added are human-caused. Each member of the local planning team, each local jurisdiction that's involved in the planning process uses a hazard identification or risk evaluation worksheet. So what that did during the planning process, that allowed each municipality and local planning team member to tell us, based on the hazards that were in the previous plan, how have they changed? Have they increased, decreased, or stayed the same since the previous plan was put into place? And what new hazards that we might not have thought of as a consultant or might not have been on that worksheet, do you think has significantly impacted your jurisdiction, your county, your local government, things like that in the previous 5 years since the last plan? So municipalities were given those worksheets and they were completed, and county worksheets were completed by the local planning team as well. With that municipality and local planning team information, we get a nice robust set of local knowledge that we might not have had as your consultant, but we want to make sure that this is representative of your plan. The next item for risk assessment is profiling hazards. So the plan must include a description of all natural hazards that could affect the jurisdiction in the planning area and their assets, such as dams and other critical infrastructure in the planning area. This requirement can be met with narrative descriptions or definitions. We do both of those things. And we also have to allow for an explanation if we're omitting any natural hazards that are commonly recognized to affect the participants in the planning area. But with your plan, our natural hazards section is quite significant, so that's not something we will have to worry about. So when we're profiling a hazard, we look at certain aspects of that hazard. The first item is to identify the location and the geographic extent of where that hazard is located. And that's done using GIS mapping and previous local knowledge. So the information provided by the municipalities and the local plan team is what we rely upon, as well as GIS data from the county and from the local jurisdictions if they have the availability and the capacity to provide that info. And then after we decide where and understand where those events and hazards are occurring, we look at the range of magnitude. So this is where we look at how badly is that area being impacted by that potential hazard. And that can be done using scales or measuring tools. This could be your EF scale for tornadoes. This could be using your Richter scale for earthquakes. These are the tools that we use to determine what impact and magnitude is going to occur from that hazard in that area. And it also defines the intensity. And then after we're done with location and range and magnitude, we look at past occurrences. So this is where we take a look at all the historic data that might have occurred in a local jurisdiction and in a specific area of interest for a hazard to determine dates and past impacts of what those hazards might have had in that area. This gives us an understanding of where we're starting off with that hazard so that we can take a look at what's going to happen in the future. And then to follow up on that, we establish a probability of future occurrences. This is based partly on past occurrence frequency, but it can also be determined using indicators of what's currently going on in a region, and we use areas to define where those future occurrences might happen. For example, if we're looking at flooding and 100-year flooding, we're specifically looking at a special flood hazard area for the jurisdiction in question. What we also look at is the effects that climate change might have on each one of the hazards for future occurrences and the increasing frequency of hazards due to climate change. And then we determine environmental impacts, such as flooding can cause polluted streams, tornadoes can cause scattering debris over large areas, and droughts can kill crops and trees. So not only are we looking at the future occurrences, we're also looking at the environmental impacts of what those occurrences might look like. And then we inventory and summarize vulnerable assets for assessing vulnerability, and this is the last item of profiling a hazard. So we take a look at existing buildings, critical facilities, new development, hazardous material facilities, utility systems. One of the big pushes during this next update that we've been putting together for Calvert County is Community Lifeline. So since your previous plan, FEMA's put out a list of Community Lifeline facilities that includes what was previously considered critical infrastructure or functional need facilities. So we're taking a look at those as well and assessing the vulnerability of those locations to each hazard as well. And we're also utilizing GIS data to take a look at where these items are, how do they overlay with all of the hazard areas, and what is specifically vulnerable to each hazard. We also review high-risk groups, or those groups that are considered vulnerable, or vulnerable groups. They include elderly, children, those with special needs. There was a big push during this update process to include socially vulnerable populations, those individuals who might not be able to attend meetings or who might not have necessarily historically been able to participate in hazard mitigation planning. That can include homeless and unsheltered individuals in the county or in the local jurisdiction. So we took a look at those high-risk groups and those vulnerable populations as well. And specifically, if we want to take some examples for flooding hazards, and some of the items of how we assess vulnerability with flooding is utilization of flood insurance rate maps and development of those flood insurance rate maps with critical facilities, impacted structures, and community lifeline facilities. One of the final tools that we use to estimate loss is determining potential dollar loss estimates for hazards and for flooding. This includes building losses, business interruption losses, and total loss, which we get from the hazardous multi-hazard software from FEMA. So that was completed as well. And finally, for assessing vulnerability, we developed a risk factor for those hazards. And that utilizes a risk factor tool, which is on the next slide that we'll show, and relies on historical data. And this relies on local planning team knowledge. So the local planning team was the one who completed the slides you're about to see for Calvert County in order to make sure that the risk factor was assessed for each hazard. So if we take a look at the next slide here, the next slide shows the approach for risk factor assessment, and it has 5 categories: probability, impact, spatial extent, warning, time, and duration. And for each one of those, there are different levels. And each level, as you can see on that slide, relates directly to a criteria and an index value. And each one of those index values was plugged in on a scale of 1 to 4 for each of those 5 categories for each hazard during the hazard mitigation plan update for Calvert County. That looks like this when it was completed. This was the one that the local planning team put together, and the one that the local planning team has been using in some of their evaluation and prioritization processes for this hazard mitigation plan update. As you can see, there are quite a few of high-risk hazards. There are 5 moderate risk hazards, and there are also 5 low-risk hazards. So this is typically the breakdown that we see for risk factor assessment, and this shows us where we have to build mitigation strategy for the county.
I'd just like to add real quick that I understand the font on these. Some of these are very small, but you will be able to read this in detail in the draft plan, and also this presentation is being recorded, so you'll be able to blow it up onto a monitor or something to refer back to. So I apologize for that. And sorry for interrupting, Adam. You can go ahead.
No, Kara, that is a great note. Thank you for making that note. So all the information that's in these slides is not just in these slides. You'll be able to see it in the plan. You'll be able to review the slides in this presentation afterwards as well. So that is a great note. Thank you, Kara. If we're looking at capability assessment, this is used to assess county and municipality availability and the resources that are available to implement hazard mitigation processes. So capability assessment forms were provided during this hazard mitigation planning process, and they assessed some of the following for each local jurisdiction and the county, which included planning and regulatory capability, what type of plans and regulations are in place to support hazard mitigation, administrative and technical capability, what type of personnel, staffing, and other resources does the county and local jurisdictions have to address hazard mitigation, fiscal capability, what financial resources are available to support hazard mitigation, and community political capability. And this is what kind of public support is there for hazard mitigation in each local jurisdiction in the county. And these forms are going to be compiled and for your review in section 5 of the 2023 Calvert County Hazard Mitigation Plan. So you can review those forms, take a look at what information was provided, and see what was said for capability assessments. The final item for tonight's presentation is a mitigation strategy review. So with the hazard mitigation planning process, with risk assessment, we're looking at what hazards are impacting a local jurisdiction, and with capability assessments, we're looking at what are the tools, resources, and capabilities that we can use to address those. And mitigation strategy is how we're going to reduce the vulnerability of the areas in the county and each local jurisdiction to those hazards, to those previous items from risk assessment and capability assessment. So the CFR note right here from FEMA states that, does the plan document each jurisdiction's existing authorities, policies, programs, and resources, and its ability to expand on and improve those policies and programs as it relates to mitigation strategy? So for a brief overview, mitigation strategy and how we determine mitigation strategy is broken down into goals and objectives review. So each mitigation strategy item is broken down into a goal, and then an objective, and then an action. So what is a goal? A goal is a general guideline that describes what the community would like to achieve in mitigation strategy, and an objective defines the strategies that must be implemented to achieve the goals. And objectives are specific and measurable. Goals are often larger and are more of a container for objectives that are then measurable and specific. So for mitigation actions, does the plan identify and analyze a comprehensive range of specific mitigation actions and projects for each jurisdiction being considered to reduce the effects of the hazards with emphasis on new buildings and infrastructure? So what is a mitigation action? An action is more specific than an objective and should address previously identified objectives. So when we started looking at the mitigation strategy for Calvert County, we used your previous plan and started fitting it more towards this goal, objective, and action organization so that it flows more evenly for use by the county, by MDEM, and by FEMA. So for 2023, we have 67 actions that were either updated or developed for this planning period for Calvert County. That includes actions from your previous plan that were renumbered and evaluated. So we took all of the previous actions and their active numbers from your previous plan. We fit it to the goal, objective, and action organization style. And all of that is located in section 6 of the plan. So if you open up the plan for your review and you open up section 6, you will see the review comments for all of the goals and objectives, and then you'll see the review comments for all the actions from your previous plan, and each one of those will have a comment, and we'll show you how the local planning team, along with us as your consultant, drafted those into a new comprehensive range of actions for 2023. We like to say that if we remove an action, we always like to put another action in, so 67 is a net increase from your previous plan. So we always like to put more robust mitigation actions into a plan for each update as we go along. So the 2023 Mitigation Action Plan identifies a mitigation strategy and a plan for the future. Each one of those actions is then broken down into different criteria, which include the category, what hazard each action is related to, a benefit and cost prioritization that the local planning team was very helpful in completing for prioritization purposes, a schedule of how long that action is set to complete, and any potential finances and funding resources for that action, and a responsible party. So this is a county office, a local jurisdiction, someone who's going to be the local champion for that action. And that defines what each action is within the plan itself, and that's included in section 6 as well. For mitigation project opportunities, what we like to do is offer up project opportunities for the county and each local jurisdiction to complete. For 2023, we currently have 12 completed mitigation project opportunity forms. That might seem like a low number, but any project opportunity forms are a net gain. So we take a look at all those project opportunity forms. They're all filed away into an appendice, and they're then included in your plan. That way, if any disaster event were to occur and pre and post disaster funds are released, those project opportunities would be one of the first items that MDEM and FEMA look at for releasing of funds in the event of those funds being made available. And that information is in Appendix G of the Hazard Mitigation Plan as well. That brings us to next steps, which includes this plan being made available for public comment starting next Wednesday. That would be July 26th, 2023, through August 25th, 2023. And digital copies will be made available at the Calvert County website for updating and for the public comment process. So all public comments must be submitted in writing to the Calvert County Division of Emergency Management at the email address listed there, or submitted via SurveyMonkey. We do have a SurveyMonkey put up for everyone's review. And then after the public comment period, the draft plan is going to be submitted to MDEM, and MDEM will then submit it to FEMA for FEMA's review and approval. Pending adoption is the step that occurs after FEMA's review goes through. And once a plan is considered approved pending adoption, each local jurisdiction and the county can then adopt the plan as their hazard mitigation plan, and the clock starts for the next hazard mitigation planning period. One of the new items with FEMA is that once the plan is approved pending adoption, each local jurisdiction and the county has 1 year to submit an adoption. But as your consultant, we'll make sure that that gets taken care of for each local jurisdiction and for the county, so no worries there. That is the end of the slide deck that I have prepared for tonight's presentation, and I appreciate everyone taking time out of their night to be here. I believe we came in at just under half an hour, so I think that that would leave room for any questions that there might be in the room or online. So Kara, I'll turn it back over to you for anyone who has questions in the room. I'll be happy to answer whatever I can.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the information that was presented or about hazard mitigation in general that they'd like to address tonight? Go ahead.
One question. What's the most efficient way to get comments back to you? Emails, attachments like a Word document? What's the most efficient?
If you have several comments on the plan, then I would request one large document, whether it's put into a Word document or all typed out into an email.
Okay.
That would be helpful, having them all in one place.
One place at one time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Kara, if we're looking at someone who has multiple comments on the plan, if they use the SurveyMonkey, there is the availability of putting bullets into the comment box on SurveyMonkey. So if someone wants to submit more than one comment on SurveyMonkey, we just ask that it's a bulleted list, and it should be set up to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Adam. Any other comments? Questions? Okay, Daryl, do we have anything online?
No hands are raised online.
Okay. All right, well, if there are no more questions in the room and nothing online, then we will go ahead and wrap up this meeting for tonight. Thank you guys all for attending and participating. I hope that you will take an opportunity to review the draft plan and provide feedback. Of course, the plan is only as good as the information that is in it, and feedback from the public is a very important part of this process. So thank you again, and have a great night.
Thank you.